Some of the first basic chords that you would traditionally learn on guitar may be too much of a stretch or require more strength than what you have as a total beginner. This may be adults, this may be children, you may have smaller hands, you may have reduced mobility, but you would still like to learn to strum some songs. Today we're going to break down 7 of these foundational chords into simplified shapes by just playing them on the thinnest 3 strings. The 7 chords are E minor, G, C, E, A minor, D. So 2 bits of information about the guitar. It has 6 strings. We are just playing the thinnest 3 strings, which are located at the bottom here. The next bit, frets. So the frets are actually these lines that go downwards, the metal lines that go downwards. But when we talk about them in terms of pressing our finger onto a fret, we put our finger on the space in between the wires. So fret number 1, for example, is in this space here. Fret number 2 is in this space here. Chord number 1 is the E minor chord. And for this chord, with our picking hands, where we will use either a plectrum or our thumb to play downwards on the thin 3 strings without any fingers on the fretboard. That gives us an E minor chord. That's a nice simple shape. Chord number 2, we are going to bring 1 finger on our fretting hand, which is the hand that will press down the strings on the fretboard. And we're going to use our first finger today, our index finger, and we're going to find fret number 3 on the thinnest string, which is an E string. So if we count 1, 2, 3, that gets us to fret number 3 just on this 1 string. So what we want to do is have our thumb behind the neck here, and our first finger, nice and rounded, is going to press down right next to this line here, just right next to it. We're going to press that down against the fretboard, and then with our pick or our thumb, we're going to play the 3 thinnest strings, and that will give you a G chord. So make sure you're pressing hard enough so that we don't get any muted sounds like this. We just need to press a little bit harder. Chord number 3 is a C chord. What we're going to do here is take this first finger, move it up a string, and then slide it back to fret number 1. So we're on the B string now on fret number 1. So this gets a little bit harder because what we need to do now with this finger is only press that 1 string down. So we need to not rest on the string underneath it, and we need to not rest on the string above it. Drag your pick or your thumb across those 3 strings. Chord number 4 is an E chord. It's also called E major. So we're going to move this first finger here up again. We're going to remain on fret number 1, but we're now 3 strings up. So we press that down. The string's a little bit thicker now, so it's a little bit harder to press down, but we can do it, So press down. So just to recap on those 4 chords, we have E minor, G, C, and E. The next chord is an A. It's a little bit more difficult because now we need to use 2 fingers to press down the strings. So we're going to take the finger that was on the first fret of that G string, and we're going to slide it up to fret number 2, right next to that line. And then what we're going to do is add our middle finger onto the string underneath it, onto fret number 2. So we've got to keep those fingers nice and close together, both of them nice and rounded, and press down, because now we're holding 2 strings down and we don't want to mute that thinnest string underneath them. Following this is another 2-finger chord, A minor, and what we're going to do here is switch these fingers around. We need our middle finger to go onto fret number 2 of the G string, and our first finger now is going to go back and play fret number 1. Chord number 7 is our first 3-fingered chord. It's a D. This is the most difficult one today, but a very common chord. We are going to take the first finger onto the 2nd fret of the G string. The middle finger is going to go onto the bottom string, which is the E, the thin E string, on fret number 2 also. And our 3rd finger now, which is a little bit more tricky, needs to go onto the B string, fret number 3. Press down nice and firmly and go for that strum. A recap on those final 3 chords: A minor, D. A recap in order of all 7 chords: E minor, G, C, E, A minor, D. A good way to practice these is take 2 chords and play between them. So play E minor to G, E minor to G. If you find that really straightforward, next we'll go G to C, G to C, and we gradually build it up like this. Ultimately, when you're learning songs, you'll be playing combinations of 2, 3 or 4 chords, for example. So a good exercise would be to take 4 chords. We'll do G, E minor, C, and play 4 down strums with your pick or your thumb on each chord and rotate the chord pattern. So if we do G, E minor, C, E minor, and again, a few tips for learning your first chords. Keep your thumb pointing upwards towards the sky. Keep your fingers rounded, because then they won't rest on the strings around them. Press down on the strings with the end of your finger. And sometimes it's slightly to the side, because you'll have to do that to fit other fingers in. If you hear this sound, it's called a mute, and it means generally you need to press your fingers down a bit harder or create a gap between the string next to it, because it's the sound of a string that you shouldn't be pressing down. And if you hear this sound, you may be too close to the fret before, so you need to move to the fret next to where you're playing and press those fingers down a little bit harder. If you find that your guitar is tipping like this because you're looking over the top of it, it makes your wrist work harder, so you have to stretch further to reach the chord. So where possible, look over the top of the guitar to see where you need to put your fingers, and when you've done that, move your guitar so it's facing forwards. It'll be much easier on your arm and your wrist. Now you're well on your way with these chords, this lesson here will show you how to play some basic strumming patterns to get you further on your journey to learning to play guitar. See you next time.